Hey Reddit, my name's Sarah, I'm 26 years old, and this is the story about how my family decided I was too embarrassing to be around during New Year's Eve, and how I made sure the only one embarrassed that night was my golden boy brother. So let's rewind a little bit. I grew up in a suburb just outside of Dallas, Texas, in one of those cookie-cutter neighborhoods where everyone waves at each other, but secretly competes over who has the nicest lawn or who drives the latest model SUV. My parents, Robert and Linda, were the type who cared more about how things looked on the outside than how they actually were on the inside. My dad works in commercial real estate, always boasting about his latest deals even when they were barely scraping by. My mom works part-time at a fancy furniture store, not because she needs to, but because she likes to tell people she has exclusive interior design discounts. That right there should tell you everything about their priorities. Then there's my older brother Jason. He's 28 now, 2 years older than me, and to my parents he has always been the golden child, the shining example of what they wanted their last name to represent. He was the straight-A student, the varsity football player, the prom king, and now he works at a bank where he makes a six-figure salary. My parents beam whenever they talk about him, as if his every move is proof they did everything right. Me? I was the chubby, bookish little sister who liked reading fantasy novels in the corner, while everyone else was busy trying to impress each other. I had a smart mouth, which only got me labeled as difficult, while Jason's arrogance was brushed off as confidence. I was the one running errands for my mom, helping my dad paint the garage, babysitting younger cousins during family get-togethers. Jason never lifted a finger, but he got all the praise. I'll never forget one Christmas when I was about 14. I spent weeks knitting a scarf for my mom. I was so proud of it because it was the first time I'd ever actually finished a big project. Jason handed her a Starbucks gift card he probably bought that morning. My mom teared up and called it the most thoughtful gift she'd ever received. Meanwhile, my scarf got shoved into a drawer and was never seen again. That moment is burned into my brain not because of the scarf, but because it showed me exactly where I stood in this family. The financial imbalance was just as obvious. When Jason turned 17, he wanted a Dodge Charger. My parents co-signed for it without hesitation. When I turned 17, I got handed the keys to a rusty old Toyota Corolla with the line, "It builds character, Sarah." Jason's college apartment, paid for by my parents so he could focus on his studies. My college years, I was working part-time at a bookstore to cover rent while juggling classes. And yet, somehow, I was the one constantly told to be more responsible. Jason wasn't just spoiled, he was cruel. He bullied me growing up in ways that my parents never intervened in. He called me whale watcher in front of his friends, or refused to let me in the pool because, as he put it, low tide isn't until Sarah gets in. I can still remember my mom rolling her eyes and saying boys will be boys whenever I complained. I internalized a lot of that for years, believing I was the embarrassing one, the one who was always in the way. Therapy later helped me crawl out of that mindset, and I've built confidence since then. I'm not thin, but I like who I am. At least I did until this past New Year's Eve. Every year my parents throw a ridiculous New Year's Eve party. I'm talking champagne fountains, catered finger food, everyone in tacky 2024 glasses, the kind of thing where they invite the whole neighborhood just to show off their house. I usually go, partly because I like seeing extended family, and partly because it is the one night of the year I feel included. But this year the invite never came. I thought maybe it was just an oversight, so I texted my mom to ask what time I should come over. Her reply hit like a slap in the face. She wrote, "Oh honey, Jason really wants this year to be special, and he's worried you'll make things awkward. Maybe sit this one out?" Awkward. That was her word. My own mother uninvited me from New Year's because my brother thought I'd ruin his big moment. Something inside me snapped. That is when the plan began forming. My cousin Tyler is 25 and works part-time for a fireworks company. I called him and asked if he had any extras lying around. He laughed and said, "I've got a warehouse full, what do you need?" That was all I needed to hear. I remembered that my dad never changed the lock on the shed in the backyard, and I still had a key from when I used to do chores for them. So, on New Year's Eve, while Jason was inside playing Mr. Perfect Host, clinking champagne glasses and probably bragging about his bonus check, I was outside in the cold rigging up a little surprise. Tyler came over to help me set up because, let's be honest, I had no clue what I was doing beyond lighting a sparkler. Together, we lined up fireworks in a way that, when they went off, would spell something out in the sky. I wanted it to be big, bold, and impossible to ignore. Midnight came. Inside the house, Jason was of course leading the countdown. I could hear his voice through the window, loud and commanding, like he was the main event. 10, 9, 8. Everyone was cheering with him, clinking glasses, hugging, waiting for the big moment. I waited until the exact second they all shouted Happy New Year. And then I lit the fuse. The backyard exploded in light. Fireworks shot up, crackling and bursting. But it was not just random bursts of color. Tyler and I had set it up so the sparklers spelled out Happy New Year. Jason still a jerk, across the night sky. It was loud, it was bright, and it was absolutely impossible to ignore. The crowd inside rushed to the windows and out onto the porch. Gasps went through the party. Champagne spilled onto the floor. My aunt doubled over laughing so hard she nearly dropped her shrimp cocktail. My uncle shouted, "That's the best fireworks show I've ever seen." While people started clapping and hollering. All eyes turned to Jason. His face went beet red. His jaw clenched, and you could practically see the steam coming out of his ears. He stormed outside screaming that I had ruined everything, that this was supposed to be his night. People were trying to hide their laughter, but no one was taking him seriously anymore. The golden boy had cracks in his crown. The best part? Tyler had recorded the whole thing. He uploaded it to Facebook before the night was even over. By the next morning, half the town had seen Jason's tantrum. Now when people spot him at the gym or at Starbucks, they shout Happy New Jerk across the room. He hates it. My parents are furious with me, telling me I crossed the line, but honestly, I do not feel bad at all. For once, Jason was the one humiliated, not me. And after years of being treated as the family embarrassment, it felt like justice. Watching Mr. Perfect finally be the one humiliated, after years of him humiliating me, was the best champagne toast I could have asked for. So the fallout was immediate. My mom called me the very next morning in full-blown damage control mode. Her voice was sharp and clipped, the way it always was when she thought the family image had been tarnished. She told me that I had embarrassed Jason in front of his colleagues, that I had no idea how hard he worked to build his reputation at the bank, and that I had set him back professionally by humiliating him in such a public way. I sat there listening, letting her ramble about appearances and reputations and how everyone was whispering now, and all I could think was how she never once cared about how humiliated I felt for years growing up. I finally cut her off and said that if she wanted to talk about reputations, she should consider the way she treated me like dirt under her shoe for the last 26 years. Then I hung up before she could spin it back into being my fault. I thought that might be the end of it, but my phone blew up within hours. Cousins, family, friends, even a couple of neighbors who had been at the party were sending me messages. Some were just laughing, others told me they wished they had the courage to do what I did. My cousin Hannah wrote that Jason had been unbearable for years, strutting around like he was the mayor of Dallas, and that what I did was the first time anyone had actually shut him up. Another cousin sent me a screenshot of Jason's face mid-firework display from Tyler's video, and the comment section underneath was filled with people making jokes about New Year's jerk. I was expecting to feel guilty, but instead I felt lighter. It was like I had finally taken back some of the power I had been forced to swallow for years. Of course, not everyone was amused. My parents doubled down. My dad called later that evening, lecturing me about how Jason's boss had been at the party, and now there were whispers at the bank about Jason's unflattering family drama. He made it sound like I had cost Jason his career, which was laughable because Jason is the kind of guy who could drown a puppy in the town square and my parents would still find a way to call him a hero. My dad ended the call by saying I owed Jason an apology, and that if I wanted to remain a part of this family, I needed to make things right. That phrase hit me harder than I expected. For years I had been fighting for a seat at the table, for any scrap of acceptance, and now he was threatening to take even that away. But the difference this time was that I did not care anymore. Because while my parents were fuming, the tide was turning with everyone else. At work, one of my coworkers who grew up in the same neighborhood came up to me and whispered, "Was that really you who set off the fireworks?" When I nodded, she said, "That was legendary," and gave me a high five. Tyler told me he had people begging him to upload the video to YouTube because Facebook wasn't enough. Apparently, the local gym where Jason works out had already turned it into an inside joke. Whenever Jason walked in, at least one person shouted "Happy New Jerk" across the room. It spread like wildfire, and for the first time Jason wasn't being praised, he was being laughed at. Extended family was divided, but more on my side than I expected. My aunt, the one who nearly choked on her shrimp cocktail, sent me a message saying that she had not laughed that hard in years and that Jason had it coming. Even my grandma, who usually stays neutral in everything, told me on the phone that Jason had been too full of himself for too long. That meant more than anything because Grandma was the one person whose opinion I actually cared about. Jason, predictably, did not take any of it well. He started making angry posts on Facebook about toxic family members, and how some people just can't stand to see others succeed. He tried to play the victim, but no one was buying it. The comments under his posts were filled with people posting firework emojis and tagging friends in Tyler's video. He deleted and reposted a few times before giving up entirely. Word got back to me that he had blown up at my parents, demanding they do something about me, as if they had any control over me at this point. What struck me most through all of this was how quickly the narrative flipped. For years I had been told I was the embarrassing one, the awkward one, the family liability. But the second Jason was exposed for being exactly what he was, a self-absorbed jerk, people rallied around me. It made me realize that everyone else had been watching too. They had seen the favoritism, the arrogance, the endless pedestal my parents built for him. They were just waiting for someone to knock him down a peg. Apparently, everyone was sick of Jason's inflated ego. So, as if the fallout from the fireworks wasn't enough, Jason decided to take things to an entirely new level of ridiculous. About a week after the New Year's fiasco, I got a Venmo notification on my phone. At first, I thought it was Tyler paying me back for the pizza we had after setting up the fireworks. But no, it was a payment request from Jason. He actually had the audacity to request $500 from me with the note, "Emotional damages." I stared at it for a good 5 minutes trying to figure out if he was serious, or if it was some pathetic attempt at a joke. Turns out he was completely serious. From what I gathered through family gossip, one of his coworkers at the bank had seen Tyler's video on Facebook. Apparently, during a staff meeting, that coworker thought it would be hilarious to bring up the Happy New Jerk fireworks show in front of everyone. Jason, who thrives on being seen as untouchable, absolutely lost it. He tried to brush it off at first, but the more people chuckled, the redder his face got. Eventually, he stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard it rattled the glass walls of their conference space. And because he couldn't just take the hit to his ego like a normal adult, he decided that I was financially responsible for his humiliation. The Venmo request was his way of demanding compensation, as if I had filed a lawsuit in the court of Jason and lost. I declined it immediately and left him a note saying, "Consider it payment for years of bullying." I cannot tell you how satisfying it was to hit that decline button. It felt like I was refunding years of being mocked for my weight, for my interests, for literally existing in the same house as him. The irony of him trying to call me the embarrassing one while begging for money because someone teased him at work was so delicious I almost wanted to frame the screenshot. Of course, my parents took his side once again. My mom called to scold me, saying Jason had been under enormous stress and that my little stunt had cost him respect at the bank. My dad chimed in with the usual family reputation lecture, reminding me that Jason had a future to protect. I reminded them that Jason wasn't some fragile child but a grown man with a six-figure salary, and if he couldn't handle one joke from a coworker, that was his problem. My dad's response was to accuse me of being vindictive, which only made me laugh. For once in my life, I wasn't the one quietly swallowing humiliation, and they couldn't handle it. Word spread quickly among extended family about Jason's Venmo stunt, and let's just say the reaction was not what he was hoping for. My cousin Hannah texted me crying with laughter because Jason had apparently complained to her husband about how unfair it was that I had targeted him, and when he explained the Venmo request, Hannah couldn't stop laughing. My aunt called it pathetic. Even my grandma, the peacemaker, said it was pitiful that Jason thought he could charge me money for bruising his ego. The whole thing became its own inside joke. One cousin even sent me a Venmo request for $1 labeled, "Emotional damages for laughing too hard at your fireworks." Jason, however, didn't see the humor. After I declined the $500 and left the note about years of bullying, he completely lost his mind. He sent a string of angry texts that I didn't even bother to read fully. Something about how I ruined his professional reputation, how I was jealous of his success, how I had always been bitter and small. The more he ranted, the less I cared. I had spent too many years taking his words to heart, letting them cut into me. Now they just bounced off like cheap insults from a stranger. The final blow came when I noticed he blocked me on every platform: Facebook, Instagram, even Venmo. At first, I thought he was just throwing another tantrum, but then I realized it was the first time in my life I wasn't being forced to endure his constant presence. No fake brotherly smiles at family events, no snide comments lurking in my inbox, no endless reminders that my parents put him on a pedestal above me. He had cut me off, and for once I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. He blocked me after that, which honestly feels like a gift. After all the drama with the fireworks, the Facebook video, and Jason's ridiculous Venmo stunt, I decided I wasn't going to let any of it drag me down. For years, my family made me feel like I was some embarrassing extra in the story of their perfect golden boy. But this time something shifted. Instead of wallowing in the chaos they created, I made a decision. I was going to take that energy and put it back into myself. So I signed up for a local kickboxing class. First, I was terrified. Walking into a studio full of people who looked like they already knew what they were doing made me want to turn right back around and run out the door. But I stayed. The first class left me drenched in sweat, my legs shaking, my arms on fire. Yet I walked out of there with a grin on my face. For the first time in a long time I felt powerful. Not the kind of power that comes from tearing someone else down, but the kind that comes from building yourself up, punch by punch, kick by kick. I started meal prepping too, not in some obsessive diet culture way, but in a way that gave me control over how I fueled myself. I found recipes I actually liked, experimented with spices, learned how to make food that was healthy and satisfying instead of boring. It wasn't about changing to fit anyone's mold. It was about giving my body the respect it deserved after years of being treated like the punchline in Jason's jokes. Weeks turned into months, and little by little I noticed changes. My arms got stronger, my endurance skyrocketed, and I carried myself differently. I wasn't shrinking into the background anymore. I was taking up space unapologetically, and it felt incredible. What I didn't expect was for other people to notice. At my cousin Emily's baby shower, I walked in wearing a simple dress I had bought on clearance. Nothing fancy, nothing screaming for attention. But the second I stepped inside, people turned their heads. I started hearing the compliments almost immediately. Cousins, aunts, even distant relatives I barely knew told me how amazing I looked. One cousin whispered that I was glowing. Another joked that she needed to sign up for whatever I was doing. And then there was Jason. He was in the corner, sulking like a toddler who had been told he couldn't have dessert. I caught him glaring at me a few times like my very existence was personally offending him. For once I didn't feel small under his stare. I felt taller, stronger. His disapproval didn't sting anymore, it amused me. Of course, my mom tried to get in on the act. She smiled tightly and said, "We're just glad you're taking care of yourself now." The way she emphasized now was like a subtle jab. A reminder that for years she saw me as a disappointment. But her words didn't land the way she intended. They didn't cut, they didn't sting. I just nodded because deep down I knew the truth. I wasn't doing this to win their approval. I wasn't doing it to finally get a pat on the head from the parents who never saw me as good enough. I wasn't doing it to compete with Jason or to try to shift the balance in my family. I was doing it because I deserved it. Because my body and my mind deserved better than the years of neglect I had accepted. Because I wanted to be strong, not for show but for myself. Every compliment at that baby shower was nice, sure, but it wasn't the fuel that kept me going. The fuel was walking into that kickboxing studio and seeing the difference in the mirror. The fuel was feeling my confidence grow in places where shame used to live. But the truth is, I'm not doing it for their approval anymore. The weirdest part in all of this came a few weeks ago. I was at the gym finishing up a kickboxing circuit when Jason suddenly appeared, swaggering in with a couple of his banker buddies. Normally, I would have ducked out early to avoid the fake charm he always turned on in front of others, but I stayed. And then something truly bizarre happened. He actually walked up to me, smiled, and introduced me to one of his friends with the words, "This is my sister, Sarah." No jokes about my weight, no snide comments, no smirk waiting for approval from his audience. Just normal. For half a second I thought maybe something had shifted, that maybe humiliating him on New Year's finally cracked through that ego and made him see me as a person. That illusion didn't last long. Later, as I was grabbing my bag, I overheard him talking to another guy from the gym. He said, "Yeah, she finally stopped being lazy." And there it was, the real Jason. He hadn't changed. He wasn't suddenly proud of me, he wasn't suddenly respectful. He just didn't like looking like the jerk anymore. As soon as people started noticing my progress, he flipped the narrative to make himself look better by acting like I had always been the lazy one and he had always been the hardworking role model. It was classic Jason, rewriting history so he came out on top. The thing is, it didn't sting the way it would have before. It didn't crush me, didn't make me doubt myself, didn't push me back into that corner where I felt invisible. If anything, it confirmed what I already knew. Jason would never change. He wasn't capable of it because his entire identity relied on being the star, the example, the one everyone admired. And that was fine. He could keep that role. I didn't need it anymore. Then came the so-called olive branch. My parents decided to host their annual 4th of July barbecue. The same kind of spectacle they always loved. Flags draped over the porch, catered food. Neighbors invited to gawk at how together we all were. Out of nowhere, my mom texted me an invitation saying it would mean a lot if I came. Not long after, Jason sent his own message. "Come on, sis, people keep asking about you." For years that line would have been exactly what I craved. To be wanted, to be included, to be acknowledged as part of the family instead of shoved into the background. But when I read it this time, it hit me differently. It wasn't about me at all. They didn't miss me. They missed how my presence made them look. They wanted me to show up so they could parade me around as proof that the family was intact, that the narrative of the golden son and the improved daughter was working out perfectly. That was the moment I realized something huge. I didn't want their approval anymore. I didn't need it. For years, I fought tooth and nail for scraps of love and validation, begging for even the tiniest bit of acknowledgement that I mattered. But once I stopped chasing it, I saw how empty it really was. What I needed was my own approval, my own peace, my own freedom. So I skipped their barbecue. Instead, I spent the 4th of July with my friends. We grilled burgers in my friend's backyard, lit fireworks until the sky glowed, and laughed so hard my stomach actually hurt. It wasn't fancy. There were no catered trays or perfectly staged decorations. But it was real. It was joy without conditions, love without a scoreboard, and laughter that wasn't at my expense. For the first time in my entire life, I felt completely free. My family wanted me gone, wanted me small, wanted me invisible. They wanted me to live in Jason's shadow forever, shrinking so he could shine brighter. But the moment I stopped living for them and started living for myself, I finally won. Jason can keep the pedestal, the fake respect, the fragile ego that needs constant applause. Because at the end of the day, no matter what he does, he'll always be remembered in our town as the guy who got roasted by sparklers on New Year's Eve. And with that, Reddit, that's the end of my story. Thanks for sticking with me through it all. Goodbye, and here's to living life for yourself.